Hi, I'm David Tracy with Jalopnik. I've been here in Nuremberg for the past month, preparing a diesel manual Chrysler Voyager for an epic road trip around Europe. Before I got to Germany, though, I had a tiff with the city of Troy, Michigan, who sent me a notice of ordinance violation. They were not thrilled that I had a dozen mostly broken, mostly unregistered cars on my property, so they gave me until July 31st to make sure I had current tags and that all of my cars were operational. So Jalopnik made a bunch of videos of me against the clock, wrenching away, selling cars, bringing cars to a junkyard. But we never did a finale because my company laid off our video team. So now, it's a month late, but here's the finale.
In addition to my Jeep Cherokee XJ, which was on jack stands at the time, I think my Jeep Cherokee Golden Eagle was probably one of the primary reasons why I received the violation notice. Because there was no hood or grill. The whole face was missing and there was a tarp over the engine bay. So I just bought another engine and I went through it. I replaced a bunch of parts on it, dropped the engine in by myself, installed the hood at night.
Look at this absurd setup here. Trying to get the hood on using the crane.
And eventually got the thing looking pretty good.
Okay, so even though I bought this engine, I'm not just going to slap it in the Golden Eagle. I've got to go through various things first, because I don't want to put it in the Jeep and then find out that it leaks, or the oil pump's bad, or the water pump's bad. I might as well replace these parts while it's out, since I have the parts as I was planning to rebuild the other engine. Right now I'm putting a new oil pump in, so that's what you see right here. These gears make up the oil pump. You can see it's filled with Vaseline. And that's just to make sure that the pump is able to prime and send oil through the engine. I just did the water pump. You can see that right here. It's a new water pump. Valve cover gaskets. I'm going to do the rear main seal, oil pan gasket. Some freeze plugs. You can see those here because some of them were seeping. Well, there was some weeping happening at this freeze plug here. So I popped it out. And what does it reveal? This is crap. You know, it actually doesn't look that bad inside. Now let's take this valve cover off and see how it looks underneath. Looks good. Let me get the saran wrap off. Always want to cover this when it sits overnight. You don't want things falling in there from the ceiling or whatever. The pistons, look at those. They look so nice. They're clearly new pistons, so the previous owners claim that these are 30 over pistons, enlarged pistons. Almost certainly true. Everything looks great. Even the rods look like they're new. So I'm removing the rear main seal. So I just used a punch, and I punched one side of the rear main seal out. You can see it's protruding from the other end right there. So yeah, it's called the rear main seal because it's that's the rear main bearing. It goes right there. It's the very farthest rearward bearing for the crankshaft. So this seal basically goes between the engine and the transmission. So there it is, half the rear main seal, and I'll be installing a new one, and all new pan gasket and all that. This thing should not leak, and if it does, oh man, I'll feel like an idiot. Okay, so it's going to rain starting in like an hour or so, and it's going to rain for the next like 4 days. And my city ordinance, I'm pretty sure the inspector's coming on Monday. I don't know exactly when, but it's Saturday now. So basically I have an hour to finish up my project, which means I have an hour to install an engine. Okay, we're maybe 10 minutes in-ish, and I've dropped the engine sort of halfway into the engine bay. Now I'm trying to lower it. It's tricky. You gotta make sure these engine mounts go into the brackets on the frame. And there's just a bunch of stuff in the way. You can see the brake booster and the exhaust manifold want to touch each other, and there's a bunch of wires. I gotta get the power steering pump out of the way. That's this thing right here. So there's just a lot of stuff in this engine bay that I have to try to make sure is gonna clear everything. So anyway, well, we'll see what happens. This is not a one-person job. This is not really gonna work, honestly, but I'm gonna try it. Okay, we're about an hour in and it is starting to rain. The engine is in the engine mounts. So you can see the engine mount is there. The problem is I'm having some trouble matching the transmission to the engine because the bolts on the transmission need to match up with the bolts on the engine. And what happens all the time is you always install the engine a little bit crooked, so the bolt holes don't line up. So what you have to do is you basically have to slide underneath and really muscle the transmission and torque it and rotate the transmission so that the bolt holes match up to the engine. It kind of sucks, honestly, but let's get to it. I'm pointing to the transmission right now. So this is the transmission, and then this is the engine, this orange thing. Basically, you can see here, you can see these are the bolt holes on the transmission, and then the bolt holes on the engine are up here. You got to get them to line up, and one of the old tricks that you do is you shove something, a screwdriver, or in this case an extension, through both of them so that you're able to basically have a guide. Basically acts as a guide. See that? So now that should go in nice and straight when I push the engine in. And I'm going to do the same thing if I can do it on the other side. And then the engine and transmission will have no choice but to mate up and be best friends. Let's install this engine. So the great thing is it's already sitting on its mounts, and the engine and transmission are together. So I really just need to tighten everything up. Man, these really suck. So I'm trying to get the bolts that hold the transmission to the engine. And man, whew, they're hard to get to. It's probably just dark for you guys. Yeah, no, you can see one of the bolts, kind of. Let's see. Yeah, right there. You can see one of the bolts. And there's another one right there. You can see the second one. I'm trying to get one that's way down there, and it is killing me. So I'm installing the hood. Let me just kind of back up a bit. Yeah, there it is, the hood. Look at this absurd setup here. Trying to get the hood on using the crane.
Let's do a recap of where things stood when I first received the violation notice. At the time, I had 11 vehicles on my property, and now I've gotten rid of 4 of them. First, there was the Willys, whose engine I had just rebuilt after I drove the Jeep into a deep mud pit that caused an engine knock. With a freshly ground crankshaft and new bearings, and my friend Brandon and I tinkering with electrical connections, we got the thing fired up well enough to where I could sell the Jeep to a gentleman named John from Pennsylvania. While picking up the flat fender, John was nice enough to tow my totaled Kia Rio, which had been sitting on my lawn for years with no front end, as I'd planned to use it for a video series that never materialized, to the junkyard, which handed me $145 for the piece of junk. The Land Rover Discovery, I slapped a new battery and starter into, as well as new jump seats for some weird reason, and this was enough to drive the Land Rover onto a trailer and tow it off the premises. Finally, there was a Jeep Grand Wagoneer, which I'd received for free a few years prior, and I'd gotten running and driving thanks to a new fuel pump, new ignition cylinder, new starter, and new brake lines. I also cleaned out the mouse nest infested interior, and by the time I sold it, it was actually a decent machine that fetched me $4,000. So this left me with 7 vehicles, the Mustang in the garage, and 6 Jeeps, which are all registered and seated nicely on my clean driveway. The Jeep Cherokee was one of the biggest hurdles in this whole thing. When I first received the violation notice, the Jeep was on jack stands, as I had just started replacing the bent front axle. I managed to do that with the help of a bunch of friends. There's a new axle in place, new axle seals, there are new brake parts, there are a bunch of new steering parts. I bolted the front fender into place, I got the vehicle inspected, and it got a salvage title in my name. It was a lot of work, but the XJ is looking good.
Alright, so I just read an email from the city inspector. He came by yesterday and said that everything looks good. I just need to get the tools off the driveway. An engine crane there, an engine stand here, various tools. And now my driveway, all of my vehicles are in the driveway. The 1994 Jeep Grand Cherokee manual transmission, 1985 Jeep J10. Here's an automatic 1979 Jeep Cherokee Golden Eagle. It's got the front end in, you know, engines in place. Whether it's running or not, we'll leave that up to imagination. It sure as heck looks like it's running, or it could be running. And then this is, okay, my 92 Jeep Cherokee. I drove it onto the driveway because that's where cars are supposed to be, not in backyards. Yep, Okay, nearly ate shit there. 91 Jeep Cherokee 5-speed, compliant. It's got tags on it and works well. 91 Jeep Comanche, which I'm currently using to store a bunch of car parts that were sitting around my yard. And in case you were curious what I had sitting in my yard: brake calipers, starter motor, these are drive shafts, track bar, drag link, another track bar. That's a turbocharger. That's an oil pan off a Subaru. This is a radiator off of a, it doesn't matter. There's so many random cars in here. There's a hood from some Chevy Impala, wheel bearing, wheel hubs, more radiators, rotors, cylinder head. Yeah. Anyway, that's it. I have accomplished the task. All of my vehicles at least appear to be running. One of them may or may not be a vehicle that I would drive any long distance, more than say 0 feet. But other than that, you know, I met the inspector's standards, so I'm glad. The whole thing has been a good thing, honestly. Just sort of gave me a little kick in the butt to sell the cars that I was planning on selling anyway. So that's it. Mission accomplished. All things are well with the city of Troy.